recognize some people that are here with me that have really gave me the motivation to continue. They've given me the motivation to continue the work that is important work, but it can be some difficult work. And so I want to acknowledge my wife who's here today, my mother who's in attendance, and my son who, man, he just gives me all the motivation I need to continue this work. So I want to take a moment to put a pin right there, and I want to remind you all to make sure that you're thanking the people that have motivated you and inspired you and those that continue to be in your corner. The work that you're going to engage in August and as you go into schools across the state, you'll see that there's going to be some days where you're going to question whether or not this is the right work for you. And you're going to question whether or not you're doing the right thing, if you have an impact. You're going to need the people in this room that support you and the people in your families to continue to tell you that you're doing the right thing and that you're making the right impact on children. And so make sure at some point, if they're not here tonight, that you call them and say thank you. And you recognize the hard work that they put in to get you where you are today. So today I want to talk about a word that kind of changed my outlook on education. This word is called impact. And see, when I started teaching, people always ask me the same question: why do you want to be an educator? You've probably been asked that numerous times in your career, why? And you probably by now, if not yet, have an elevator speech ready to tell. You have a passion for kids and you want to see kids learn. You love to see the light bulbs go off. But when somebody asks me the question why, the question about impact, what do you want your impact to be? It stumped me for a minute. Because when you think about impact, it means that you have to do something to a child to make them see something different. And in a minute I'm going to ask you that question, but I want to give you a definition for impact. And definition for impact means a force exerted by a new idea, ideology, or concept. And so I want you to think for a moment about that. And I want you to think for a moment and do a think, pair, share out here, because I'm an elementary principal, so I like to do my strategies. But I want you to take a moment and think about this question. I want you to think about it, pair up with somebody, and then share. When you go into the school in August, what do you want your impact to be? I'll take about 1 minute, let you think about that and share with your colleagues. What do you want your impact to be? Oh, it's a deep one. All right, we'll come back in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. First, I want to thank you for taking the time to share what your impact will be and what you want your impact to be. And I hope that if you haven't yet thought about that question and you don't have an answer just yet, that you spend some time thinking about what your impact will be and what you desire it to be. And today I want to talk to you about impacting African American boys. It's a very, very dear subject to me, being an African American man and then having an African American son. It's a very, very dear topic for me. And so I want to share with you someone that impacted my life as an educator. And so when I was in 8th grade, I had a teacher named Mr. Postal. He was a middle-aged Caucasian man, and he taught math with a passion. He loved teaching mathematics, and he would talk about it in the hallways when we got to class. He just was enthusiastic about teaching math. And so it impacted me in a way. It made me excited about teaching, about learning mathematics. And so in his class, I wasn't always the best behaved child. Sometimes I was a smart mouth, and sometimes I wanted to be the class clown. And being honest with you, and my wife and my mother know about my sarcastic mouth that I had. And so, you know, I wasn't the star student, but regardless of that, you see, Mr. Postal did something for me that was paramount in my life, because Mr. Postal took time outside of the math teaching to impact me. And what Mr. Postal did was something that you may hear is taboo in schools today, is that he took his 30-minute duty-free lunch and he would sit with us and he would talk to us about the lesson that he taught and how it connected to real life. And so he would talk to us about life and about college, and he would tell us about how to be young gentlemen and why we should hold the door for young ladies. And he taught us how to shake hands and look people in the eye. And he even taught us how to tie our ties. And so even though those things my mother had shared with me before, and it was nothing really new to me, it was the fact that this gentleman took the time out of his day to teach me. He didn't have to, but he did, and it had impact on me. And when it was time for me to go to college, I had to decide, what am I going to do? What's going to be my major? And he impacted me so much to the point that I even decided to be a math major. And even though that was a short-lived degree, and I switched over to education, the impact in math, he truly made me believe that I could be a scholar in mathematics, and that teaching was the right thing for me. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about why having an impact on African American boys is so important. So recently in Memphis, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. And so we had a lot of events and a lot of great things that took place, a lot of symposiums, and people talked about how we can change education and the culture of Memphis and Shelby County. And some people decided to do a study to look at 50 years ago, his assassination, to now, how have things changed? And if you just look at the times, we've had so many advancements in smartphones and technologies and tablets and iPhones, and we've had an African-American president for 2 years, so certainly there's been some changes in Shelby County and just Memphis, Tennessee, and I want to share with you some of the findings from that study. And so in that study they said that since 1980, childhood poverty for Shelby County children has grown worse. They said the childhood poverty rate for African American children is more than 4 times greater than that for whites. They found that 50 years later, African Americans still earn half of what whites earn. Even among white-collar workers, managerial, clerical, and sales jobs, African Americans earn half of what white Shelby residents earn. And the most disturbing statistic that I saw, the incarceration rate for African Americans grew 50% since 1980, while the incarceration rate for whites fell slightly. And so you may have heard of the pipeline to prison, and you may have heard of how schools are supposed to be there to circumvent these kind of things, and you look at how money is allocated across the state into prisons and how less money has been pumped into schools. But see, when I read this statistic, it's disturbing, because when there's high incarceration and crime, that means schools are failing. And today, when we talk about the word impact, it's so critical that you as new teachers and educators understand that you have impact. And our job as educators is to change the incarceration rate for African Americans, but specifically for our boys. And so if we talk about, as we brought up earlier, about Starbucks, and we look across the country, part of what we have to do is be real and admit the fact that there is a fear for African American men in our country. And when we look at the news every other day, there's a black man that's unarmed, that's being shot or being used excessive force, and they don't find any weapons on him, but yet nothing happens. And you talk about Starbucks, where 2 gentlemen went to sit down to have a meeting and were arrested. We have to face those biases, and we have to look at our stereotypes that we may have about African American men and boys, and we have to face those head on so that when we go into classrooms, we can make a difference and impact their lives. And so what I want you to understand about being an educator is that your race doesn't matter when you teach children. It doesn't matter, and people will try to tell you otherwise and try to say that because you're black that you can teach black kids better, but see, that's not the case. What matters is, what impact do you want to have on our boys, and what's in your heart, and what are you willing to do to change their lives? And so today I want to share with you a couple things you can do that when you get to the classrooms, how you can be truly impactful on the lives of our African American boys. And so today I want to be a little candid, and I want to share with you my first experience in teaching. And please don't judge me. It was my first year, and it was a rough year. So I want to tell you about what happened that first year of teaching for me. You see, when I graduated from college, it was in December, and I got hired in January. And if you know anything about education, when you take a job in the middle of the year, it means one of 2 things. See, somebody either retired and left, or they got fired. So, what you're getting is not the best of classes. And so when I took the job, the teacher actually quit middle of the year. And I remember walking into set my room up, and I actually met the teacher, and she gave me some words of, I guess what she called encouragement, but she told me, she says, God bless you, son. Are you taking over this class? I said, yes, ma'am. I'm gonna be teaching this class. And she said, man, this class here is, I can't use the words she used because I want to. But she said this class here is terrible. They don't listen. They don't want to do any work. Their parents are lazy. They don't support you, and they just don't want to learn. And I remember looking at her little box. She had a box about this big of things, and I thought, she must be coming back to get the rest of the stuff later. And then she walked out the door. She said, and by the way, you can have all of it. I'm not coming back to this. So I said, my goodness, okay, that's fine. I've been trained to be a teacher. I know what to do. I've been to courses and I know what to do. So never forget the first day I walked into the school and I was walking with the principal and we walked down the long hallway and he was giving me words of encouragement. He was telling me how great I was going to be and how I was at the right place at the right time and the support I was going to get. And I remember walking into that classroom and I turned around and asked a question, the door shut and he was gone, and I was faced with 22 children, and it was 22 kids, but I promise you it felt like this room here. It felt like there's so many eyes on me looking and say, what are you going to do with us, sir? And so I thought I would go back to my teaching, and I said, you know what I'll do? I'm going to build relationships by team building. I'm going to find out what kind of music they like, and their favorite food, and their favorite music, and their favorite movies. And I thought because of that, I built relationships with them. I thought I knew them, and they knew me. And because I'm a black man, these are black children, they're going to listen and do what I ask. And so I made the mistake of thinking I had more authority than I had, because I thought that when I told them to sit down, they would sit down. And when I said, do your work, they would do their work. And when I asked a question, every hand would go up. And it didn't work like that. Needless to say, the girls were angel students, but my boys gave me the blues that year. It was a struggle. And I remember every day I kept trying to figure out what's the disconnect and why won't they listen to me and why every day are we going back and forth. And at the end of that year, I contemplated quitting the profession. I said, this is not for me. I must have chosen the wrong thing because this is too much. And I tried, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. I tried. I applied for about 30 jobs and I didn't get any, no callbacks, no anything. And that was for a reason because, see, I was in the right profession, in the right place. I just didn't know what to do. And so I had to open my mind to be coached. And so one thing I'm going to stress to you is, as you become new educators, you must be coached. You have to have an open mind, a growth mindset around the work that you're going to do, because there are those out there that know what to do and will help you with that. And so I had to open my mind to be coached, but I had to reflect as well as to why I was unsuccessful my first year. And so the coach began to share some things with me that she noticed as I was teaching, and she had to school me on some things when you work with African-American boys that I didn't consider. And so she shared with me that, see, how the boys that you have, they want your attention. They just don't go about it the right way. And it began to make sense to me that, see, the boys you're going to teach, they're going to demand your attention, but see, oftentimes they go about it in ways that drive you up the wall. And so, as a teacher, you have to teach our boys the right way to get attention. But see, at home, for some of our children in poverty, some of our boys in poverty, they may be one of 4 or 5 different siblings in the household. And at times, there may be aunts and uncles and cousins, nieces and nephews that live in one household. And so if you want attention, then you have to do things to get attention. And so you have to begin to understand why our children act out and our boys act out sometimes. And she also helped me understand that you can't expect boys especially to sit in a desk for 45, 50 minutes while you lecture them. See, she taught me that you have to be engaging to children. You have to make sure that what you do is engaging and exciting for your boys. And so what I began to understand was that, see, I had to make provisions for my boys in the classroom. I changed my whole setup in my classroom. I brought in beanbag chairs, and I brought in some ways that they can, some benches where kids can go sit. And I stopped saying you can't move in your desk and you can't get up. And I started allowing them to stand up when they did their work. And I started putting in ways that children could discuss and move across the room. And I had to teach them how to have conversations that were about academics. And so these are some of the things I want you to remember as you get in front of your boys in the classroom. Understand that you can't lecture them. You have to think about engagement and what that truly means when you begin teaching. The other piece that I didn't understand about my boys and my parents was that Oftentimes we hear teachers and other people say that they're lazy and that parents are lazy, they don't care. And so you have to dig a little deeper and find out why. That when you see your students in class, why are they tired? And so you have to ask questions and find out that sometimes it's not that they're lazy, it's that they're up all night because their parents have those siblings at home, and that they're responsible for taking care of their siblings because their parents may work overnight. The other piece you have to know too is that sometimes they're tired because as a teacher I had to own the fact that I was just boring. And my practice wasn't adequate to teach the population I was teaching. And so as you begin reflecting on your lessons that you're teaching, you have to ask yourself, is what I'm giving the children really what they need, or am I just giving lip service? Because your boys at times are the quickest ones to be bored, and when they get bored, that's when you begin having trouble in the classroom. And so the biggest thing I want you to understand from that is you have to build meaningful relationships if you're going to be a great teacher. The second year I came back, I really began to understand this. And so what I did from the beginning when my children came to the class, especially my boys, the first thing I did was I greeted every child at the door. I began shaking their hand and giving them hugs and letting them know I was happy to see them, because that relationship piece matters. If they can't relate to you and know that you care, they won't care what you're going to teach them. And you're going to hear that over and over again, but I stress to you the importance of it. I began taking my lunch break like Mr. Postal did for me, and people actually told me I was crazy for doing that. And people, teachers I'll say, told me, Humphrey, why are you taking your lunch break? You know you have 30 minutes free, right? You don't have to do that. But I'll tell you something. I sat in the teacher's lounge a couple of days, and I'm telling you, that was almost the worst thing I could have done, because if you're not ready to speak up for children, don't go in the teacher's lounge. Because some of the most toxic comments you'll hear about children and children of color and boys you'll hear in the teacher's lounge. So I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sit with my kids. And because I sat with my children, my boys specifically, I started to learn about what they were into. And so I took that back to the classroom. And in my lessons, I incorporated those things in the lessons, and they perked up when they heard me talk about sports sometimes and racing and things like that, because they were into those topics. I began coming up on Saturdays and mentoring some of my boys because I thought about what Mr. Postal did for me, and I knew that this was necessary for me to do. And I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm just telling you some things that create relationships and have impact on the boys. And I'll tell you this, when I started mentoring, teachers also told me I was crazy because they asked me, "Are you getting paid?" I said, "No, I'm not getting paid for it, but it's the right work to do." And so I spent my Saturdays working with the boys and teaching them about life and telling them about college and trying to inspire them to do more than what's in their community and think about more than what they thought they could do. And I knew it was working because I tell you, every Saturday I got there, they were there waiting on me. So I knew it was impactful work. And the last thing, the thing that really clicked for me is you're going to have your students ask you, when you start with creating relationships, they're going to ask you to come to the things on the weekends when they have football games and basketball games and recitals and karate championships and all these things that kids are into these days. They're going to ask you to go. And when I was a teacher, you see, I felt like, I'm not going to do that. I don't have time. I'd rather watch college football on Saturdays and go see that. But they kept asking and asking. And one day I said, I'm tired. I'm tired of y'all asking me. I didn't tell them I was going to go. I just decided to show up. And so at the time, I'm not going to lie to you, I was a little selfish. So I showed up kind of late, and I tried to sneak in the back. And when I got there, the coach had everybody huddled up, had about 11 boys on a team. And I snuck up to the back of the crowd, and I was just kind of going to hang out and say hey and then dip on out. And so some of the boys, they saw me, and I saw him point, and he tapped somebody else, and he pointed, and tapped somebody else, and he pointed. And next thing I know, I got 8 boys while the coach is up there trying to give his speech. They're all looking back and they're waving their heads. So the coach, if you ever know football coach, they're intense. And they, "Do I need to stop this thing?" I said, "Whoa, no, go ahead, keep on. I'm just here, sir. Don't mind me." And so I remember when he broke the huddle, and I could be exaggerating, but I want to say about 11 out of 11 boys sprinted past their parents, and they came and they hugged on me, and they gave me fist bumps, and we were high-fiving, but I couldn't understand. I'm like, what is the big deal? I just showed up, and when I began to think and look around and see the smiles on their faces, I understood it was It was bigger than me showing up. It was the fact that I took interest in their lives. I took interest outside of school, and their parents looked at me differently. And from that, I'm not going to tell you it was a perfect year, but I will tell you the classroom was different from that day forward. And the parents were different from that day forward because they truly knew I was invested in their children. What I also want to share with you is you have to teach like their lives depend on it. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, some of the children you're going to face, their lives depend on it. These boys you're going to come across, their lives depend on it. And what I mean by that is you have to bring it every day. There might be content, there might be curriculum you disagree with. It might not be exciting. You have to make it exciting for these boys. You have to be the one to bring the life into the classroom. I tell my teachers at my school now, you can't teach from your seat. You have to teach from your feet. You see, you can't expect to sit down for 45, 50 minutes and point to a board and think that our boys and even our kids are going to learn from you. You have to be up moving. You have to allow them to move, to be engaged in the work. And see, if you're not putting on a performance, you're going to lose. And I'm speaking from elementary school, but when I look at some of the data from high schools, some of the same things have to apply. And we've all been to college, or either in college now. And I'll tell you, when I was in biology, that was a tough class for me because I had to sit there and listen to somebody show a PowerPoint for almost an hour and 30 minutes. And I'm going to tell you now, I didn't always go. So when you think about your classroom, think about what you didn't appreciate as a student. And you have to be that teacher for your children. The next thing I want to share with you is about positive reinforcement. One of the things you're going to hear, unfortunately, if you haven't heard it already, you're going to hear a child tell you, and you ask him, why'd you do something? They'll tell, I'm just bad. I'm bad. And you're going to hear some parents, unfortunately, in the meeting tell you, he's just bad. When he's at church, he's bad. When he's at home, he's bad. When we go to the store, Mr. Humphrey, he is bad. And I have to stop parents and stop children right there and say, no, no ma'am, no sir. They're not bad. They're making bad decisions. As adults, as educators, it's our job, our responsibility. The impact comes when we begin to teach them. You're not bad. We have to show them how to make the right decisions and why it's important to make the right decisions. And so I tell you about the school I work at now, where I'm the administrator. And when I got to school, the principal, again, left for whatever reason, and I interviewed the teachers at the school, and every teacher I interviewed, they told me, I asked them, you know, what's the one thing needs to change at the school next school year? And every teacher told me, the kids are off the chain. And if you know what off the chain means, it's a word for saying the kids are bad, okay? And every teacher told me the same thing. It's something you don't fix anything. You've got to fix the behavior of these children, especially the boys. And so when I got to school and we started the school year, the first thing I caught on to is that I work in Millington, Tennessee, and if you know anything about Millington, it's out in the country. And so I have 10 buses of kids that come from the inner city, and they're bussed in, some kids 20, some kids 30 minutes on a bus to the school. And what I realized quickly is there's a disconnect between home and school, and the kids didn't feel like this is my place, this is my school, this is my home, like it would be a neighborhood school. And so one of the first things I said we had to do is we have to start creating positive connection with kids from the beginning. And so we put a person to unload the buses that greets the children when they get off the bus, tell them good morning, give them a high five. And I put somebody at the front porch when they walk up to greet them, give them a hug and give them a high five and tell them thank you for coming to school. And I put somebody at the front door to give them a high five and a hug. And then I put 2 people inside the door to give them high fives on both sides. And then I stand by the stairs every day, and before the kids go upstairs, I shake their hand, and I look them in the eyes and tell them thank you for coming today. I appreciate you. And the reason I do that is because, see, if a child walks to the door and they don't smile, something's wrong. And I encourage you that when you're in your classrooms to greet every child, but don't just greet them in passing. Don't make it a, hey, okay, go on in. Look at them in the eyes and say good morning. Require them to say good morning to you because, see, the eyes will tell you. So when a child comes to school and the eyes tell me something's wrong, I can't send you upstairs to learn. because I've got to address what's going on first. And if you try to teach children without showing that you care, you're going to have a rough time in education. So as I get ready to close out, I want to share this with you. Your mindset about children matters. The things you think about the boys you're going to teach matters, because one thing you'll learn about children, and boys especially, they can pick out a fraud quick. And if you're not authentic, and you show them just one time, I don't care about you, oh, they're just going to be on in your classroom. And they are going to make your job difficult for the rest of the year until you turn that thing around. And so what's just important to me, we talk about this impact thing, and I'm a sports fan, and I can't help but bring sports into this, but you think about a player like LeBron James, and I hated that he went to Miami because I just don't like super teams, but LeBron, when he left Cleveland, you see LeBron is a great player on the court, but LeBron has impact off the court. See, when LeBron left, he took money, the economy almost collapsed in Cleveland because jobs were lost and tourism declined. And when LeBron came back, he brought back that excitement about the city. People began coming, jobs resurfaced, and people began to thrive again. And so my point with that analogy is this, is that you can be a great teacher of content, and you can fail to have impact on a child's life. And so you have to be great at teaching, guys. I don't want to put any qualms out there about it, because when I hire a teacher, you got to be able to teach. But I look specifically for people that have a desire to have impact on children, which means they have a desire to have relationships with kids, especially our boys. And so remember this, that the most important thing when you start in August, from day one, you must begin to build relationships. You must teach like their lives depend upon it. You must speak words of encouragement into children's lives, especially our boys. This 2% interrupting patterns and shedding stereotypes, that was even mind-blowing to me, but when I reflected on my career, oftentimes I was the only male, let alone African-American male in the school. And if we are going to change that statistic, it is incumbent upon you all to understand that your race, your color does not matter, your gender does not matter. But what we must do is create positive experiences, and that begins through kids believing that you believe in them and that you care. And when our boys begin to have positive relationships with you, they begin to love school. And they will come and they will thrive. And when they get out, just like Mr. Postal did for me, when it's time to graduate, they'll say, I want to be a teacher. Just like my second grade teacher. Just like my 8th grade teacher. Just like my 9th grade teacher. And my hope for you is that you are one that a child remembers and says, I want to be like them. And so, in closing, George Washington Carver said this: no individual has any right to come into the world and go out of it without leaving behind him distinct and legitimate reasons for having passed through it. Which means that all of us are here on assignment. Your assignment is to be a teacher, but be impactful. Change the lives of the boys and children that come into your room each and every day. Take no days off from that assignment. I wish you all an impactful career. Thank you all for being a part of this. This is an awesome program. This is an awesome thing to be a part of. And I wish I would have been a part when I was a teacher. I probably would have had that first year go so terribly, but it happened for a reason, so I can learn. And so, as I go forth today, I wish you all the best of luck as educators, and I'm so proud and thankful to be here in front of you all. Thank you.